Anna wiped the counter for the third time even though it was already clean. The small diner smelled of fresh coffee, fried eggs, and a hint of grease that never really left no matter how hard anyone scrubbed. It was early morning, and the sky outside was still gray. The first wave of customers, mostly truck drivers and tired office workers, were sipping their coffee in silence. For most of them, Anna was just another waitress, someone to refill their cups and bring their plates. They didn't know her story, and honestly, they didn't care. Anna was only 23, but her eyes looked older than her years. Every day she woke up at 5, prepared a quick breakfast for her mother, who was too sick to work, and then hurried to the diner before 6. Her mother had been diagnosed with a heart condition 2 years earlier, and since then, Anna had taken over every responsibility in the house. Rent, medicine, groceries, everything depended on her paycheck and the small tips she collected. Her co-workers sometimes complained about the long hours or rude customers, but Anna rarely joined in. She didn't have the luxury to complain. She needed this job, even if it meant standing on her feet all day, smiling at people who barely looked at her, and swallowing her pride when someone spoke to her like she was nothing. Despite the tiredness, she had a gentle way of moving through the diner. She remembered regulars by name, noticed when someone needed a refill before they asked, and always had a polite smile ready, even if her legs ached or her back hurt. Many customers ignored these small efforts, but a few older ones often told her she reminded them of their daughters or granddaughters. Those little words kept her going. At night, when the diner closed and she finally walked home, her shoes worn thin and her apron stained, she would still stop by the pharmacy to buy her mother's medicines. Some days she had to make choices, whether to buy the full prescription or save a little for rent. Those were the nights she lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how long she could keep balancing everything. Her father had left when she was very young. Anna had no memory of him, only a vague story her mother told once about a man who promised he'd come back but never did. Whenever Anna asked more, her mother would shake her head and say it didn't matter. What mattered was surviving the present, not chasing ghosts from the past. Still, Anna sometimes looked at the old ring her mother had passed down to her on her 18th birthday. It wasn't shiny or expensive, but it had a strange design carved into it, like a family crest. Her mother had told her to keep it safe, that it was special, but she never explained why. Anna didn't think much of it. She wore it mostly because it was one of the only nice things she owned. Customers sometimes noticed it and said it looked antique, but Anna would just smile and change the subject. Life in the diner was a routine that never changed. The bell above the door would ring, people would shuffle in. She would greet them with the same cheerful words, write down their orders, and rush between the kitchen and the tables. The tips would go into a jar at home, where she saved every dollar carefully. Her dream wasn't to be rich. All she wanted was to pay off her mother's hospital bills and maybe, one day, go back to school. She had once loved studying and dreamed of becoming a teacher, but those dreams had been pushed aside when reality demanded otherwise. There were days when exhaustion nearly broke her. Once, after a 12-hour shift, she came home and found her mother struggling to breathe because she had skipped taking her medicine to save it for later. Anna sat by her side all night, holding her hand, terrified of losing her. In those moments, she promised herself she would never give up, no matter how hard life got. But even with all her struggles, Anna never lost her kindness. When a homeless man came into the diner, dirty and shivering, she gave him a free bowl of soup and paid for it out of her tips. When a single mother with 2 kids didn't have enough money for dessert, Anna slipped 2 slices of pie onto their table anyway. She believed that even if the world had been harsh to her, she could still choose to be gentle to others. To most people walking into that diner, Anna was invisible. Just a young woman in a faded uniform taking orders. Nobody knew about the nights she cried quietly into her pillow, the mornings she skipped meals so her mother could eat, or the dreams she buried deep inside her heart. To them, she was just a waitress, one of many. But Anna's life was about to change in a way she never imagined. She didn't know it yet, but soon someone would walk through those diner doors who would see the one thing everyone else had overlooked. The ring on her finger, the simple piece of jewelry she had worn for years without thought, would catch the eye of a man who held more power and wealth than she could ever dream of. And in that moment, Anna's life would shift forever. It was a slow Tuesday morning at the diner. The rain had just stopped outside, leaving the streets wet and shining under the pale sun. Anna was wiping down the tables, humming softly to herself, when she heard the loud purr of an expensive car engine outside. That sound didn't belong in this part of town. Most of the cars that stopped near the diner were old trucks, rusty sedans, or delivery vans. But this one was different. Through the foggy glass window, Anna saw a sleek black car, polished so well it reflected the world like a mirror. The door opened smoothly, and out stepped a tall man in a tailored suit, followed by a driver holding an umbrella. The man didn't look like he belonged anywhere near the diner. His shiny leather shoes looked too expensive to touch the cracked pavement, and his watch probably cost more than what Anna made in a year. The bell above the door rang as he entered, and suddenly the whole diner seemed quieter. The regular customers, who usually didn't care who came and went, turned their heads for a second. There was something about him, his confident walk, the way he didn't glance around like an ordinary customer. He walked like he owned the place, even though he had clearly never been there before. Anna straightened her apron and stepped forward with her usual warm smile. "Good morning, sir. Table for one?" she asked gently. The man barely looked at her. He gave a small nod and walked toward a booth in the corner, the kind of spot where people sat if they wanted privacy. Anna followed quickly with a menu in her hands, though she doubted he would actually look at it. His type didn't usually eat at diners like this. They were more used to five-star hotels and fine dining. "Coffee," he said shortly, not even lifting his eyes from the phone in his hand. Anna hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Of course. Would you like anything to eat with that?" "No. Just coffee." His voice was firm, cold, the kind of tone that made it clear he wasn't used to being questioned. Anna went back to the counter and poured the coffee, reminding herself not to take it personally. She had met people like him before, wealthy men who thought a waitress was invisible. Still, she couldn't help but feel a little sting. She was used to being overlooked, but the sharpness in his voice felt like a reminder of her place in the world. She placed the cup on his table carefully. "Here you go," she said softly, though he was still glued to his phone screen. The man was Richard Hale, one of the country's most powerful billionaires. He owned companies, buildings, and entire chains of luxury hotels. His name appeared in newspapers and magazines, usually alongside photos of glamorous parties or giant business deals. But Anna didn't know that. To her, he was just a man with too much money and too little kindness. What Richard didn't plan that morning was to end up in a small-town diner. It wasn't part of his schedule. His driver had suggested stopping because Richard hadn't eaten breakfast and they had hours left before the next meeting. Richard had only agreed because he didn't want to argue. In his mind, this diner was nothing more than a temporary stop, a place to waste 15 minutes while drinking coffee that probably tasted terrible. As he sat there scrolling through his phone, he felt out of place. The chairs were old, the tables had scratches, and the smell of bacon hung in the air. He was used to marble floors and crystal glasses, not plastic menus and paper napkins. But something made him stay longer than expected. Anna, meanwhile, was busy serving other customers, but she kept noticing him out of the corner of her eye. He seemed restless, checking his watch, typing messages, sipping his coffee without ever really tasting it. She wondered what a man like him was doing here. People like him didn't just appear in this town. There had to be a story behind it. At one point, the diner's cook, an older man named Joe, leaned over the counter and whispered, "Fancy-looking guy, he? Looks like he took a wrong turn." Anna smiled faintly but said nothing. She didn't like to judge people. Still, she could tell this customer was different. There was a heaviness in the way he sat, like he was carrying the weight of something bigger than just business. When she went back to refill his cup, he finally looked up at her properly. For a second, his sharp blue eyes studied her face. Anna felt a little uneasy under his gaze, but she kept her polite smile. "Top you off?" she asked, holding the coffee pot. He gave a small nod. "Thank you." His tone was softer this time, almost distracted, as if his mind was drifting elsewhere. That was the first moment their worlds touched. The billionaire who thought he had seen everything and the waitress who thought she was invisible. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate was quietly setting the stage. A single detail, something small and ordinary to Anna, would soon shatter the walls between them. It wasn't her smile, her words, or her kindness that would catch his attention. It was something else entirely. On her hand, as she set the coffee pot down, the light from the diner's hanging bulb glinted against the ring she always wore. It was an old, slightly worn piece of jewelry, but under the right light, its engraved design shone clearly. Richard's eyes caught it for just a second before he looked away again, not realizing yet how familiar it was. Anna didn't notice. To her, it was just another day, another customer, another cup of coffee. But soon, this unexpected visitor would no longer see her as just a waitress. The ring on her finger was about to change everything. The diner was busier now. The sound of plates clinking, forks scraping, and soft conversations filled the air. Anna moved quickly from one table to another, balancing plates with practiced ease. She had been doing this job long enough that her hands almost worked on their own. Yet, despite the rush, she noticed the man in the corner booth, Richard, every now and then. Something about him stood out in the small-town diner. Richard sat stiffly, like he didn't belong there. His tailored suit looked too perfect for the cracked leather booth, and his expensive watch gleamed under the yellow light. Every movement he made, from lifting his cup to tapping his phone screen, seemed deliberate, like he was too important to waste even a second. When Anna approached with the menu earlier, he hadn't even bothered to look at her. To him, she was just part of the background, like the old jukebox in the corner or the coffee machine humming near the counter. She was simply the waitress, nothing more, nothing less. But Anna didn't let it bother her. She had learned a long time ago not to expect kindness from every customer. Some people came in with their troubles, some with their pride, and some with their silence. She just did her job, no matter what. Still, something about this man's coldness stung. His words were short, his tone sharp, as if speaking to her was a waste of his energy. When she asked if he wanted food, he dismissed her quickly, like her question wasn't worth answering. She told herself to brush it off, but deep inside, she couldn't help but feel small for a moment. Richard, on the other hand, didn't even realize how his behavior came across. He wasn't trying to be cruel, at least, not on purpose. He simply lived in a world where people served him, not the other way around. He was used to assistants, staff, and waiters who obeyed without question. For him, this diner stop was nothing more than a pause in his busy day, and Anna was simply part of the service. As Anna walked away to help another customer, Richard finally lifted his eyes and watched her for a brief moment. He noticed how quickly she moved, how she carried 3 plates at once, how she remembered which customer wanted extra sugar without writing it down. There was something graceful in her routine, something almost admirable, but he didn't admit it to himself. In his mind, admiration wasn't for waitresses. Anna returned after a while with the coffee pot. "Would you like a refill?" she asked, her voice steady, polite. Richard nodded without looking at her. But just as she leaned closer to pour, the light caught her ring again. His eyes flicked to it unconsciously. He saw the design for the second time, and something in his chest stirred. The carving on the ring, it wasn't random. It looked familiar, though he couldn't quite place it yet. Still, instead of asking about it, he pushed the thought aside. His pride wouldn't let him start a conversation with a waitress about her jewelry. He was a man of numbers, deals, and contracts. He wasn't the type to get distracted by little details. Meanwhile, Anna noticed the faint lines on his forehead, the way his jaw tightened when he looked at his phone. He seemed stressed, tired, maybe even lonely in some way. She wondered what kind of life a man like him lived. To everyone else, he probably had everything: money, power, luxury. But the way he sipped his coffee without tasting it, the way his eyes seemed far away, made her think that even billionaires carried their own silent burdens. Anna didn't know who he was. She didn't read magazines about wealthy businessmen or keep up with the news. To her, he was just another stranger passing through. Another customer who would leave and probably never come back. But for some reason, this one left an impression of distance, of coldness, but also of mystery. Richard's first impression of Anna, however, was much different. To him, she was nobody. Just a young woman in a faded uniform, working long hours in a place that didn't match his world at all. He didn't see her tired eyes, her quiet strength, or the sacrifices she made every day. He saw only the surface, a waitress whose job was to serve coffee and disappear into the background. But fate has a strange way of shifting perspectives. What Richard failed to notice in his first impression was that sometimes, the smallest people carried the biggest stories. And sometimes, a single detail could change everything. As Anna walked away again, he found his eyes following her ring once more. The design tugged at his memory like a whisper from the past. He frowned slightly, trying to remember where he had seen it before. But before he could place it, his phone buzzed with another urgent message, pulling him back into his world of business. Anna didn't realize that his gaze had lingered. To her, he was just another cold customer. One more man who looked at her as if she were invisible. She had no idea that the ring on her finger, the same one she wore every day without a second thought, was already breaking down the wall between their two worlds. For Richard, this was just the beginning. His first impression of Anna as a nobody was about to be shattered. Very soon, he would discover that the girl bringing him coffee carried a secret far bigger than he ever imagined. The morning rush had slowed down. Most of the customers had already eaten and left, leaving behind only a few who lingered over their coffee. The diner was quieter now, filled with the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the clinking of cups being washed behind the counter. Anna finally had a moment to breathe. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, straightened her apron, and walked back to the corner booth where the rich man sat today. Richard was still there, his coffee half finished, his phone buzzing with constant notifications. He barely touched the pie Anna had set down earlier after Joe, the cook, insisted he try a slice. Richard seemed lost in thought, his sharp eyes darting across the screen of his phone, his fingers tapping quickly as if every second mattered. Anna approached with the pot of fresh coffee. "Would you like a refill?" she asked softly, her polite tone the same as always. This time, Richard looked up. Maybe it was the sudden quiet of the diner, or maybe it was the way her calm voice pulled him out of his world of numbers and deals. For the first time, his eyes properly met hers. And then, as she leaned forward to pour the coffee, the light above caught her hand. The ring. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of diamond ring one expected to see on a billionaire's wife or a wealthy socialite. Instead, it was old, worn at the edges, and simple in design. But engraved on the surface was a symbol, a crest of sorts, delicate yet clear. Richard's heart skipped a beat. He froze for a second, his eyes locked on the ring. He had seen that symbol before. Not just once. Not in passing. That design was burned into his memory. It was the same crest engraved on an heirloom his late mother had shown him when he was a boy. She had told him the crest was part of their family history, something passed down through generations. It wasn't something anyone outside his family should have. Where did you get that ring?" Richard's voice was different now. The sharpness was gone. There was something else. Confusion, maybe even disbelief. Anna looked at him, puzzled by the sudden change in his tone. She glanced down at her hand as if she had forgotten the ring was even there. "This? Oh, it was my mother's," she said simply. She poured the coffee and placed the pot back on the counter. Richard leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ring more closely. His hands, usually steady and controlled, trembled ever so slightly. "Your mother's?" he repeated, his voice quieter this time. Anna nodded. "Yes. She gave it to me on my 18th birthday. Said it was special and that I should always keep it safe." She smiled faintly, almost shyly. "I don't know much else about it. It's just a family thing, I guess." Richard's chest tightened. His mind began racing. That crest wasn't just a decoration. It was unique, belonging only to his family line. The idea that this young waitress, this woman he had dismissed as nobody, was wearing something so deeply tied to his past made his stomach twist. "Did she ever tell you where she got it?" he asked, his voice sharper now, not out of rudeness but out of urgency. Anna tilted her head slightly, surprised by his sudden interest. Most customers didn't even notice her ring. Some thought it was just a cheap antique. No one had ever stared at it like this. She said it was given to her a long time ago. By someone important. But she never explained who. Her words hit Richard like a storm. His breathing quickened, though he tried to hide it. Memories rushed back, his mother telling him stories of his father's younger years. The whispers of a relationship that had never been spoken about openly. Could it be? Could this waitress be connected to him in a way he never imagined? He stared at Anna, truly looking at her now for the first time. Her features, so ordinary at first glance, suddenly seemed sharper to him. There was something familiar in the shape of her face, something in her eyes that reminded him of someone from long ago. Anna, on the other hand, felt uncomfortable under his intense gaze. She shifted slightly, brushing her hand against her apron. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. Richard leaned back, trying to compose himself, but the shock was too strong. He had come into this diner thinking it was nothing, a random stop on his busy day. And yet here he was, staring at a young woman wearing a ring that should have never left his family's hands. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt unsure. His world, usually so controlled and predictable, suddenly felt unstable. This waitress, this girl who carried plates and poured coffee, was no longer just a stranger. She was connected to something much deeper, something personal, something he couldn't ignore. Anna, unaware of the storm building in his chest, smiled gently as she turned to leave. To her, the conversation was over. She had no idea that the ring she wore so casually was shaking the billionaire to his core. Richard watched her walk away, his thoughts spinning. The crest, the ring, her mother's mysterious story, it all pointed to one possibility. And if his suspicion was right, this waitress was not a nobody. She was someone who could change everything. As Anna disappeared behind the counter, Richard sat frozen in his booth, staring into his untouched coffee. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about money, meetings, or deals. He was thinking about her. The waitress with the ring that should have never been hers. And in that moment, he knew he wouldn't leave the diner without finding out the truth. The diner had grown quiet again. A few customers sat at the far tables, slowly finishing their meals, but Richard barely noticed them. His focus was fixed on Anna, who was wiping down the counter with her usual calmness. His mind raced with questions he never thought he would ask in a place like this. He couldn't stop staring at the ring on her finger. Every time the light caught it, the engraved crest seemed to remind him of his own family's history. He had seen that exact symbol on his mother's pendant, on documents his grandfather had left behind, even on the old portraits that hung in their ancestral home. That ring was not just jewelry, it was a piece of his bloodline. Finally, Richard stood up from his booth. For a man who usually carried himself with absolute control, his steps felt heavy. He walked to the counter where Anna was working. She looked up at him with a polite smile, the same smile she gave every customer. "Can I ask you something?" Richard's voice was low, almost hesitant. "Of course," Anna replied, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "That ring on your finger, you said it belonged to your mother. Did she ever tell you where she got it?" His eyes were fixed on her hand, his voice sharper now. Anna blinked, confused by his sudden interest. No one had ever cared about her ring before. "She told me it was a gift," she said slowly. "A long time ago, when she was young. She never talked much about it." Richard leaned in slightly, his expression intense. "A gift from who?" Anna frowned, unsure how to answer. She thought for a moment, trying to recall the rare times her mother mentioned the ring. "She never said his name," Anna admitted. "Only that he was someone important to her. But he left before I was born." The word struck Richard like a hammer. His chest tightened, and he gripped the counter without realizing it. "Left before you were born?" he repeated, his voice trembling slightly. Anna nodded slowly. "Yes. I don't know much about him. My mother raised me alone. Whenever I asked about my father, she would change the subject. She said it didn't matter anymore, that all that mattered was us. For a moment, Richard felt like the room was spinning. He thought about his own father, a man who was known for his charm, his business travels, and the secrets he often kept. His mother had once told him that before he was born, his father had been reckless, that there were things he had done that the family never spoke about. Could this waitress, this young woman standing in front of him, be part of one of those secrets? Richard studied Anna's face more carefully now. There was something about her eyes, the way they seemed familiar. He couldn't explain it, but deep inside, a strange feeling told him that the truth was closer than he imagined. Anna, on the other hand, felt uneasy under his intense gaze. "Why are you asking me this?" she asked softly. "It's just a ring. It doesn't mean anything." Richard shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "That ring means something. More than you know." Anna looked down at her hand, frowning. She had always thought of the ring as nothing more than a keepsake, a small reminder of her mother's love. To hear this stranger insist that it carried more meaning unsettled her. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. Richard hesitated. He couldn't just tell her everything. Not yet. He needed to be sure. "I've seen that crest before," he finally said. "It belongs to my family. That ring, it shouldn't be here, not unless there's a connection." Anna's eyes widened. "Your family?" "Yes," Richard said, his voice heavy. "My mother used to wear the same symbol. It's part of our history. If your mother had that ring, then," he paused, struggling to find the right words, "then she must have known someone in my family." Anna's heart skipped a beat. She had always wondered about her father, about the man her mother never spoke of. Could this stranger in an expensive suit really be connected to that mystery? "Are you saying, you think my mother knew your father?" she whispered. Richard swallowed hard. The possibility felt too real to ignore. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I need to find out. I need to know the truth." Anna felt a wave of emotions. Confusion, curiosity, even fear. For years, she had lived with unanswered questions about her father. Her mother had always brushed them aside, leaving Anna to fill the silence with her own guesses. And now, suddenly, a billionaire was standing in front of her, claiming that her simple ring might hold the answer she had searched for her whole life. She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. "This doesn't make sense. Why would someone from your family? Why would someone like that give this ring to my mother?" Richard looked at her with an expression that was both pained and determined. "Sometimes the people we think we know keep secrets," he said quietly. "Sometimes they leave behind things we don't understand." For a long moment, the two of them stood in silence, the noise of the diner fading into the background. It was as if the world outside had disappeared, leaving only the waitress with her simple life and the billionaire with his heavy questions. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "I need to meet your mother," he said firmly. "She's the only one who can tell us the truth." Anna's breath caught. No one had ever taken such interest in her mother, let alone demanded to meet her. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but deep down, a part of her wanted answers too. Maybe this was finally her chance to know the truth about the father she had never met. Her hand tightened around the ring, her mind torn between fear and hope. She nodded slowly. "All right," she said softly. "But you have to promise me, you won't hurt her. She's been through enough." Richard's voice softened, his eyes steady. "I promise. I just need the truth." And with that question, with that promise, both their lives began to change. Neither of them knew exactly what they would uncover, but they both knew one thing. The ring was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was the key to a hidden story that would bring their worlds crashing together. The air inside the diner felt heavy after Richard's request. Anna stood still for a moment, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Nobody had ever asked to meet her mother before. Her mother lived quietly, away from strangers, her health too fragile for unexpected visits. Anna's instinct was to protect her. But something in Richard's voice, something urgent, almost desperate, made her pause. Richard leaned forward, his eyes searching Anna's face. "Please," he said, more softly now. If your mother truly owned that ring, then she knows something I need to hear. I won't hurt her. I just need answers. Anna hesitated. She had always been careful about her mother's past. The older woman didn't like to talk about it, and Anna respected that. Still, deep inside, Anna had questions of her own. Questions about her father. Questions her mother had always avoided. And now, here was a man, a billionaire no less, insisting that her mother's story was tied to his family. She sighed quietly. She's not well, Anna said at last. She gets tired easily. I don't know if she can handle surprises like this. I'll be gentle, Richard promised. But this is important. More important than you realize. That evening, after her shift ended, Anna walked home faster than usual. Her thoughts wouldn't settle. The streets were dim, the lamps buzzing faintly as she passed them. She kept replaying Richard's words in her mind. That ring shouldn't be here. It belongs to my family. When she stepped into their small apartment, the familiar scent of medicine and faint lavender greeted her. Her mother, Maria, sat in the worn armchair by the window, a blanket draped over her thin shoulders. She looked up with a weak smile. You're home early today, Anna. Anna forced a smile back, though her heart was racing. Yes, Mama. I just needed to talk to you. Her mother tilted her head, sensing the unease in her daughter's voice. What is it, my dear? Anna sat down beside her and hesitated. For years, she had held back her questions, afraid to upset her mother. But now, with Richard waiting for answers, she couldn't stay silent. She reached for her mother's hand. Mama, the ring you gave me. Who gave it to you? Maria's eyes flickered with something. Fear, perhaps, or sorrow. She looked away, as if the question had pulled her into memories she had tried to bury. Anna, why are you asking this now? Because someone recognized it today, Anna whispered. A man came into the diner. He said the crest belongs to his family. He wants to meet you. Maria's hand tightened around Anna's. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Her eyes grew wet with tears she fought to hold back. His family, she repeated softly. Anna nodded. Yes. He said his mother wore the same symbol. He thinks you might have known someone close to him. Mama, is it true? Is this ring connected to my father? The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Maria closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I never wanted this day to come, she whispered. Anna's heart pounded. So you do know. Please, Mama, tell me the truth. Who was he? Maria took a deep, shaky breath. Your father. He was not an ordinary man. He came into my life like a storm, charming, powerful, but always carrying secrets. He loved me, or at least I believed he did. But his world was different from mine. He belonged to a family of wealth and influence. When I became pregnant with you, he left. He said he couldn't bring me into his world. Before he went, he gave me that ring and told me to keep it safe. A promise, he said, though it was one he never kept. Anna's throat tightened. For years she had wondered, imagined, even invented stories about the man she had never known. To finally hear it confirmed, that he had been real, that he had chosen to leave, made her chest ache. Maria looked into her daughter's eyes. I never told you because I didn't want you to grow up with anger. I wanted you to focus on building your own life, not chasing after shadows. Anna's voice trembled. But Mama, this man today. His name is Richard Hale. He said the crest belongs to his family. Could he be related to my father? Maria's eyes widened slightly at the name. She covered her mouth with her hand, as if the sound of it carried too much weight. Hale, she whispered. Yes, that was his name. Your father's last name was Hale. The truth hit Anna like a wave. Her knees felt weak, though she was sitting. Richard hadn't been mistaken. Her mother had just confirmed it. Maria's voice cracked. I didn't want you to be dragged into that world, Anna. They live differently. Their lives are filled with power, but also with pain and greed. I wanted to protect you from that. Anna held her mother's hand tightly, her own tears falling now. Mama, I deserve to know where I come from. I've always felt like a piece of me was missing. Maybe this is the chance to finally understand. Maria hesitated, torn between fear and love. Finally, she nodded weakly. If he truly wants answers, then let him come. But Anna, promise me something. What, Mama? Promise me that no matter what you learn, you won't let it change the kindness in your heart. Don't let their world harden you. Anna nodded, her chest heavy with emotions. I promise. Later that night, as Maria rested, Anna sat by the window with the ring in her hand. The small crest gleamed under the moonlight, no longer just a piece of jewelry but the key to her hidden past. Her father had been a Hale. Her mother had loved him once. And now, a man from that same family had walked into her life, demanding the truth. Somewhere in the city, Richard Hale was likely thinking of her too, piecing together the fragments of a secret his family had never spoken about. They were strangers from different worlds, yet bound by a connection neither of them had expected. The waitress and the billionaire were no longer just two people crossing paths in a diner. They were pieces of the same story, tied together by blood, secrets, and a ring that refused to be forgotten. The next day, Richard returned to the diner earlier than usual. He had barely slept the night before, his mind restless with questions. The image of the waitress and her ring had haunted him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the familiar crest, his family's crest, shining back at him. He had to know the truth. Anna was already there, her apron tied around her waist, serving customers as if nothing had changed. But when she noticed Richard walk in, her heart skipped a beat. She had told her mother everything, and Maria had finally agreed to meet him. The decision weighed heavily on Anna, but she knew it had to be done. Richard didn't order anything this time. He went straight to her when she had a free moment. His voice was low but firm. Did you talk to your mother? Anna nodded. Yes. She said you can meet her. For a moment, Richard felt relief wash over him. But beneath it was fear. What if the truth he had been chasing for so long turned out to be something he wasn't ready to hear? That evening, Anna brought him to their small apartment. Richard stepped inside carefully, his polished shoes clicking softly against the old wooden floor. The place was modest, nothing like the marble halls and grand rooms he had grown up in. Yet, somehow, it felt warmer. The scent of home-cooked meals, the worn-out furniture, the soft blankets, everything spoke of love and resilience. Maria sat in her chair near the window, her face pale but her eyes sharp. When she looked up and saw Richard, something in her expression shifted. She recognized him, not his face exactly, but the resemblance. His strong jawline, his piercing eyes, even the way he carried himself. It all reminded her of someone she once knew, someone she had loved. Richard froze too. He had seen photographs of his uncle when he was young, and the woman in front of him seemed to carry pieces of those same memories. For a few moments, silence filled the room, heavy with history neither of them had spoken aloud yet. Finally, Maria broke the silence. You are a Hale, aren't you? Richard swallowed hard. Yes, Richard Hale. My family, we've carried that crest for generations. And that ring your daughter wears, it should not be outside our bloodline. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. It isn't outside your bloodline, she said softly. Richard's breath caught. What do you mean? Anna sat close to her mother, holding her hand as Maria spoke. Many years ago, I met a man. His name was Daniel Hale. He was charming, full of dreams, and he loved me, or at least, I thought he did. But his world and mine were never meant to be together. When I found out I was carrying his child, he left. He told me he couldn't defy his family's expectations. But before he went, he gave me that ring. He said it was a promise, though I later realized it was also a goodbye. Richard's eyes widened. Daniel Hale. The name hit him like a blow. That was his uncle, his mother's younger brother. A man who had disappeared from family gatherings years ago, spoken of only in whispers. Richard had always wondered why Daniel had distanced himself. Now he knew. He turned toward Anna slowly, his heart racing. That means, you're my cousin. Anna's lips parted, her eyes wide with shock. She had wondered about the connection, but hearing it confirmed out loud made her chest tighten. For so long, she had felt alone in the world, with no father, no extended family. Now, in one evening, she had discovered that her bloodline carried a name she had only heard from a stranger in a diner, a name tied to wealth, power, and secrets. Maria closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. I never wanted her to grow up feeling abandoned. That's why I kept the truth hidden. I didn't want her to chase a family that had rejected us. Richard's voice softened. For the first time, his cold, businesslike tone was gone. You weren't rejected. Daniel, he may have made mistakes, but you were never forgotten. My mother, his sister, always wondered what happened to him, and if he had left something behind. Now I see. He left her. He looked at Anna with new eyes, no longer as a stranger, no longer as a nobody. She was family. Anna's emotions swirled inside her. Hurt, anger, but also relief. Hurt that her father had walked away. Anger that her mother had carried this pain alone. But also relief that finally, she had answers. She wasn't just a nameless waitress in a small town. She was part of a bigger story, one that connected her to a family she had never known. Richard stepped closer, his voice steady but warm. Anna, I know this is a lot to take in, but you deserve to know your place in the Hale family. You deserve to know your father's name, your history. You're not just a waitress. You're part of something larger. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I don't want riches or names, she said quietly. I just wanted to know why he left. Why he never came back. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand. Sometimes love is not enough when pride and fear are stronger. He was weak, Anna. But you, she looked at her daughter with pride, you are stronger than both of us. You've made a life for yourself with nothing but hard work. Richard's chest tightened as he watched the exchange. He had come searching for answers about a ring, but what he had found was far more valuable. A missing branch of his family tree, a truth buried by time, and a young woman whose quiet strength humbled him. As the evening stretched on, they talked more. Richard listened to Maria's memories, filling in the gaps his family had never spoken about. Anna listened too, every word carving itself into her heart. It was painful, yes, but it was also healing. For the first time in years, silence was replaced by truth. When Richard finally stood to leave, he looked at Anna differently. No longer as a stranger, but as family, someone whose story had just become tied to his forever. And as Anna watched him go, she realized her life would never be the same again. The truth had been revealed, and nothing could take it back. The days after Richard's visit felt different for Anna. The diner was still the same. The smell of coffee, the sound of clinking plates, the regular customers. But inside her, everything had changed. She was no longer just a waitress with unanswered questions about her past. She now carried the truth of who she was, where she came from, and why her mother had kept silent all these years. Richard had promised to return, and he did. Every day for a week, he came back, not in a suit, not carrying the cold air of business, but as a man trying to build a connection. At first, Anna was unsure how to act around him. He was still a billionaire, still someone from a world far beyond hers. But when he sat at the counter, sipping coffee quietly and asking about her day, he seemed human. Less like a powerful figure and more like a cousin who wanted to understand her. Maria watched this with quiet eyes. She had always feared the Hale family, afraid they would judge her, reject her, or worse, take Anna away. But Richard was different. He didn't come with threats or pride. He came with sincerity. And though he carried the Hale name, he also carried something else. Regret for the distance his family had allowed to grow. One evening, Richard invited Anna and Maria to the city. I want you both to see where you belong, he said gently. I can't change the past, but I can open the door to your future. Anna hesitated. The city, the Hale estate, the wealth, it all sounded overwhelming. She wasn't sure she wanted to belong to that world. She had always been proud of her independence, of the life she and her mother had built with nothing but hard work. Still, a part of her longed to know what it felt like to stand in her father's world, to see the place where her bloodline came from. So they agreed. The trip was surreal. The Hale estate rose like a palace against the skyline. Marble pillars, tall windows, gardens that stretched farther than Anna could imagine. For someone who had grown up in a cramped apartment, the sheer size of it felt unreal. She held her mother's hand tightly as they walked through the gates. Inside, Richard introduced them to his mother, Anna's aunt. The woman's eyes widened when she saw Maria, and then softened when she looked at Anna. For years, she had wondered what had happened to her brother Daniel. To finally see his daughter standing there was like looking at a ghost from the past and a promise for the future. Tears were shed, hugs were exchanged, and slowly, walls began to fall. The Hales, who had once been a distant, untouchable name, became flesh and blood. They weren't perfect. There were tensions, questions, and the weight of old mistakes, but they were family. For Anna, the experience was overwhelming. She saw wealth she had never dreamed of, tasted foods she had never imagined, and walked through halls that echoed with history. Yet, even in the middle of it, she knew something important. She wasn't defined by this. Yes, she was a Hale by blood, but she was also Anna, the girl who had worked double shifts to keep her mother alive, the girl who had learned strength from struggle, the girl who had never needed riches to prove her worth. Richard noticed this strength in her. "You're different from us," he told her one evening as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. "We were born into this, but you earned everything you are. You carry our name, but you don't need it to shine." Anna smiled faintly. "Maybe, but it feels good to finally know who I am. To know I wasn't forgotten." Her mother, Maria, sat with them, watching the two worlds slowly blend. She had feared this day for so long, yet seeing her daughter embraced instead of rejected filled her with peace. She realized she had been wrong to hide the truth for so many years. Yes, there had been pain, but there was also healing. As weeks passed, Anna's life changed. Not in the sense of riches or luxury, though the Hales offered her everything, but in the sense of belonging. She finally knew her roots. She had an aunt who cared, a cousin who respected her, and a father's memory that, though flawed, was finally whole in her heart. But Anna didn't quit the diner. She still worked shifts, greeting the same customers, pouring coffee with the same smile. When people asked her why, she simply said, "Because this place made me who I am." The diner wasn't just a job, it was her story. Richard often visited, no longer the cold businessman he had been that first day. He laughed more, shared stories, and even helped carry trays when the place was too busy, much to the amusement of the regulars. The billionaire who once thought a waitress was nobody now understood that real worth wasn't written in bank accounts or family crests. It was written in resilience, kindness, and love. For Anna, life was no longer about surviving one day at a time. It was about building something new, with her mother, with her newfound family, and with the strength she had always carried inside her. The ring, once just a small piece of metal on her finger, now carried a story complete. It wasn't only a reminder of her father's broken promise. It was also a symbol of the truth that had finally come to light, a bridge between her past and her future. And so, the girl who had once been seen as just a waitress was no longer invisible. She was Anna Hale, the daughter, the cousin, the survivor, the dreamer. A woman whose story proved that even in the smallest places, hidden truths can change everything. The new beginning wasn't about wealth or power. It was about peace, belonging, and the strength to stand tall in both worlds, the humble diner and the grand Hale estate. Anna had finally found herself, and in doing so, she had given her mother and Richard something priceless too, hope.